Hi, it's Dorothy Guinan with Scrapbooking Quebec. In this video, I'm participating in Janet Fritz's monthly YouTube collaboration, Stretch the Sketch. In this series, we start with a 12 by 12 sketch and then we alter it. We either shrink it or we stretch it. Here's the sketch we're playing with in August. It's a multi-photo layout designed by Laura Whitaker. It's a great design if you have tons of photos. Think birthday parties, family gatherings, vacation photos. Below, you'll find links to all the other participants, so be sure to check out what they do with this month's sketch. My plan is to stretch it into this 10-photo double page spread. Actually, there are 12 photos there, only 2 are hidden. Here is what I'm going to be using. I have material from Vicki Boutin's Where to Next collection. Also, I will be digging into my tools, and everything I use will be listed in the description box below. Before jumping in, I want to have another look at the sketch with you just to let you know what I'm thinking when I start this process. For my left page, I'm pretty much going to be following the sketch, except I'm going to be replacing all of that mixed media with paper layers. Mixed media serves as a base layer for photos and embellishments. So if you're not into paint and splatters, you can replace it with paper. It doesn't give you the same results, of course, but paper can serve as a base layer. Then my plan is to stretch the layout to the right by adding one more row of those small photos and one focal point photo. That notebook cluster that you see at the top right, I'm going to be placing that at the top right as well, only mine's going to be landing on page 2. So here's what's on my desk. In advance, I prepared a frame style foundation page for 2 pages with 4 papers. And I just showed you there that I gutted 2 of the papers. There's a tutorial on my channel where I explain how to do that. I also showed you that I rounded the corners of the white cardstock. Now I'm showing you my photos, and they are all matted in that blue paper. And that blue paper is the paper that I gutted from behind the foundation page. So here are the other papers. I have a handful of scraps. I have some printed paper from the Where to Next collection. I also have tons of embellishments. I've been playing with this collection for a few months now, so they're pretty beat up. But I have some fussy cut pieces, ephemera pieces, stickers. Anyway, I'll go through that later on when I use them, and I also have a basket of tools. So you can see the sketches in the top left-hand corner. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a mat that spans across the 2 pages, and that's where I will be placing those rows of small photos. So for me, my mixed media is being replaced by this paper mat. Even though you don't see it on the sketch, like I mentioned in the intro, mixed media is a great home to place your photos and embellishments. Well, so is paper layers. So that's what I'm doing right now. You can see I cut 2 different pattern papers. I'm adhering them together. When I put the measurements on the screen, keep in mind I put measurements for visible paper only. So that green paper overlaps the other printed paper. So that other printed paper, the measurements I list on the screen are actually smaller than what I cut. Once I adhered the 2 together, I did apply a bit of ink all around the outer edges, and now I'm cutting this mat in 2. So it's going to span across the 2 pages. The larger piece is going to go on the left-hand page. That's where the 2 rows of photos are going to go. And the more narrow piece is going to go on the right. That's where 1 row of small photos will be placed. So now I'm placing everything on the page just to give you an idea where I'm going with this. I'm kind of tossing that mat a little bit down towards the bottom because you may notice, like on the sketch, that row of photos that's on the right-hand side of that page, the left page, I should say, it kind of bumps up a bit. So for that reason, I moved my middle mat down a bit. Now, underneath that focal point photo, I want to add another paper layer. So I'm trimming down this green paper. I will put measurements on the screen. I'm thinking I'm doing it at about 7¼ inches, but I may be wrong. So check the measurements on the screen. And what I'm going to do with that is create a notebook border punch. And honestly, I am inspired by the sketch here. It's not going to be placed in the same area, but if you look at the sketch, 2 areas, there are notebook pages. So that's why I reached for my notebook border punch, which is from Creative Memories. It's one of their retired cartridges for their border maker system. So I just trimmed down the border edge because it was a little bit unequal. And now what I'm going to do is just make this a little bit shorter. So I end up making it shorter than I wished. I'll talk about that later on, but I end up using it anyway. You may have noticed I rounded the corners of my notebook, and now I'm using ink. I'm using the same ink I used before, which is Morning Mist by Versafine Clair. It's kind of a gray ink. Now I'm placing this on my page, and it's here that I'm realizing I really wished I had cut that green paper larger, but I don't have any more of it, so I'm just going to have to make it work. So now what I'm going to do is adhere the mat across the 2 pages along with the small photos, but I will keep my focal point photo and that notebook page separate for a little while. So you may notice I'm starting by adhering the mat on one side, so I'm doing it on the left. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to tape the 2 pages together. I'm using that low tack mint tape from the scrapbook.com. It's a great way to temporarily position something without ripping your paper. And that makes it easy for me to position the mat that flows across the 2 pages. So I just make sure that it matches up on the right what I'm doing on the left. That didn't come out very smoothly, but I think you probably know what I mean. Now what I'm doing is adhering my 9 photos down. So I'm starting with 1 row on the right, and it fits right inside that mat. But on the left-hand page, that first row, it's going to be bumped up a bit. So it's going to kind of bleed off that mat towards the top, which is why I placed that mat a little bit down towards the bottom. That mat in the middle, I made sure it wasn't exactly equal in the middle. I made it so that it was placed a bit towards the bottom. And that 3rd row on the far left, that once again fits right inside the mat. So now what I got to do is place that notebook page along with my focal point photo and kind of decide what I want to do with that. Now, I have to mention the adhesive I use here because it's really important. I knew I was going to be tucking that notebook page underneath the mat that I already adhered, but I adhered anyway. And the adhesive I'm using, I think it's called Scrapbook adhesive, something like that, the Easy Runner strips. It's permanent, but it gives me wiggle room. So I was able to lift that mat that I already adhered and slipped something underneath. And that's why I use that adhesive, because I always have wiggle room. Once I get to this point in the layout, the next thing for me to determine is where I'm going to be putting my journaling and my title. So I show you there, I have 2 planner pages. I showed you a die. It will be listed in the description box below. I use it all the time. It's a planner page die from Elizabeth Craft Design. So I cut out 2 of them, and now I'm showing you a little book that I created, a little flap that I created. Basically, I am going to place my focal point photo on top of that little flap. And all I did to create that flap was in white cardstock, I cut myself out a piece of paper that was twice as wide as my focal point photo with mat. So instead of 4¼ inches wide, I cut it at 8½ inches wide. And it's the same length as the photo with mat. So 6¼ inches long. And then I folded it over and created a little book with it, and that's going to house 2 more photos. And as you can see, I've moved on to showing you my embellishments. So I have those little basically circle embellishments. Those are cut from that paper. They are umbrella tops. I have papery pieces, ephemera pieces, stickers that I showed you, and I'm also showing you I prepared my title in advance that I cut out using 2 different die sets from Stampin' Up. So I have the large letter dies and the Playful alphabet dies. They will be listed below. They're both retired, but if you can get your hands on them, I use them all the time. They are fantastic. Now what I want to do is show you how I created adhesive letters. So I'm showing you these Be Creative tape sheets. So basically what I did was I cut myself out paper the size of the letter. So I'm only doing it for 1 letter here, but obviously I did it for more letters when I created my title. Then I take my paper and I cut myself out the same size from the Be Creative tape sheet. And I flip my paper over, remove one of the 2 backings from this adhesive sheet. I tape it or adhere it behind my paper, and then I place my alpha on top of it and I ran it through my manual die cutting machine, and out popped self-adhesive alphas. I do it all the time and it makes adhering titles so easy. So now what I'm going to do is kind of work on the right-hand page, which is going to be my main embellishment area. So I am going to be placing my photo purposefully a bit down towards the bottom of the page, because what I want to do is repeat that cluster that you see on the sketch with those notebooks that are on the top right of the sketch. So what I'm doing here is I'm layering up papery pieces behind my photo at the top and behind that planner page. And what I'm focusing on mostly is color here. What I really want to focus on is the blues and the greens. I will add a hint of red a little bit later on in the smaller pieces. That's because I want to keep my embellishment clusters. I want them to be significant, of course. However, I don't want them to have a huge wow impact, because already I have 10 visible photos on the layout that are in color. So that takes up a lot of attention. So if I have these embellishment clusters with wow factors all over the place, I am going to distract away from my photos. I will have no idea where to look. So when I'm creating these embellishment clusters, that's what I'm thinking. I want to keep them more or less in that blue and green color scheme. I will add a little pop of red just to add a little tiny something that is interesting in them. I'm also thinking I want to keep them in their areas. So my main embellishment cluster is going to be on the top right above my journaling box and focal point photo. And then later on, you're going to see me create another fairly significant one in the kitty corner where my title's going to be. And in the end, you will see I add a hint of a third one for a visual triangle. You can see I've moved ahead to adhering. So I'm starting with that big bingo sheet, and then I came in with a planner page. I don't quite want to adhere my photo yet because I do have pieces I want to tuck underneath them. These papery pieces that I'm using are great for lots of layering. I like that because they are super thin, but at the same time you do have to be careful because they are super thin. You don't have a lot of maneuverability once they are adhered to the page. You can move them, but they will bend easily. So keep that in mind if you're using those papery pieces. When I go to adhere the photo, I think I did it already, but the tape I used was, I should say, the Scor-Tape. And basically it's a heavy duty tape, and it's great if you're using anything or creating anything interactive. You may have noticed as well on the right hand side, the last thing I did was add a few of those circles, those umbrella tops, just sprinkled them in the top right corner. Those were kind of my finishing touches, my smaller pieces. And I also added one down towards the bottom of that flat book, and that's going to serve as my little tab to open up that book. Now I'm working on the kitty corner, the bottom left. And if you look at the sketch, that's where the journaling is. Well, I'm not going to place my journaling there because I have a giant journaling box over on the right. But what I'm going to do with that is use it as a home for my title. Now I already have that planner page, which is a repetition of the planner page that's already on the right. However, the white on white didn't show up, so I added a piece of papery, that blue piece underneath, just to add a bit of contrast. And on the sketch, what they used was mixed media. Again, I used paper. So I played around with the placement of my title, which is on wax paper, which is a great way to play with placement of the title. And then I come in with a few pieces of those cutout circles there. I'm playing with a few other pieces here. I have that little blue passport, which is from the ephemera pack. But what I'm keeping in mind when I'm creating this second embellishment cluster, already I have a huge one in the top right corner. I don't want this one to be as big. I want it to be nice. I want it to show up, but I want it to be smaller than the embellishment cluster that I've already created. Also, the one on the right doesn't have the journaling yet. Once that journaling box is filled in, that cluster is going to have more of an impact. Words are almost part of the embellishing, or I think so anyway. They certainly create a visual impact on the page. Now what you see me doing is playing with these washi tape stickers, which are part of this collection's papery pack. There's like these circles that look like almost the stain left from a paint can. And I'm thinking maybe that will kind of add a little bit of mixed media look that's on the sketch. Maybe that will add it to this layout. And I'm even applying one. So I play around with that a bit, but in the end, you're going to see, well, right now I'm removing it. I actually put it back on, but it doesn't stay there. And for the very same reason I think I mentioned earlier, there's a lot going on in this layout with 10 visible photos. So really, when I'm creating my embellishment clusters, I want them to look nice. I want them to serve a purpose, which is to kind of guide the eye around the layout, but I don't want them to compete with my photos. And by adding those washi tape circles, I felt like I was starting to make these embellishment clusters just a little bit too impactful. So you can see I've changed my mind there. Now I have my cluster more or less adhered in the bottom left, though I haven't yet adhered those circles. So I'm just kind of playing around with them a bit and playing around with the layers there. Some are underneath the little planner page, some are underneath the papery piece. And also what I've already done, I did it on the top right as well as what I'm doing right now. The small yellow circles that I'm adhering, I popped those up on foam adhesive just to add a little bit of dimension and interest to those embellishment clusters. Now what I want to do is just add some finishing touches. So I got out the stickers there and I have this sticker, it says, "All you need is your passport." And it is blue, that blue that I'm already using. And it happens to fit exactly or almost exactly across one of those small photos. So I add that there, which brings me to this little passport that is part of the ephemera pack. Basically, it's the very same color blue. So at this point, I've already added a tab to that book with one of those circle umbrellas. So I decide I'm going to beef up that area a bit more by adding that passport. And that more or less completes my visual triangle. Now, I want to say that on the sketch, there really isn't that much of a visual triangle there, but even when I'm following a sketch, when I get to this point, even if I'm following it to a T, I pretty much abandon the sketch because I've already come this far, and at this point, I've got to make what I've created work for me. So for that reason, that's why I put that blue passport underneath that little tab in the flap there. So what you also saw me do was get out the puffy title sheet there. And on that puffy title sheet were little dots. So what I did was in the center of each one of those circles, there's a little dot. on top of it, I added a dot from that puffy title sheet, and I kept it tone on tone. So on the yellow circles, I added yellow. On the red, I added red, etc. For the same reason I mentioned earlier, I don't want to draw any more attention to these embellishment clusters that are already significant, but I want my photos to stand out. I'm really thinking I don't want this to get too busy. It's already busy. Now I'm finishing off the planner pages by stamping in those tabs, and the stamp set I used is called Tabs for Everything. It's really old, from Stampin' Up, and I stamped the word remember in each one of those tabs. I also came in with a staple, but I decided to add more staples off camera, so I'm not sure if you can see them, but anyway, that is my finished layout. And off camera, I added my journaling, so I don't know if you can tell, but I think journaling does have a decorative impact, or it certainly has a visual impact on a layout. I also added a few more staples and 2 more of those umbrella tops, both in red. Again, just adding a hint of another color, getting away from that blue and green. I suppose there's a bit of yellow in there as well. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd greatly appreciate a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, Scrapbooking Quebec, I would be thrilled if you did. And if you are a subscriber, thank you very, very much. Don't forget to check out the other participants. Their links are listed below. Have a great day, and I will see you probably September 1st on YouTube with my September Scrappy kit and plans. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.